Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you for that applause. Well, very much undeserved, but thank you. I'm really pleased to be here to kick off the 2025 meeting on the Mesa. The weather gods have been favorable to us. The temperatures are perfect versus what we experienced in the very hot heat last year. But I'm really pleased to share that we have been having a really interesting year in 2025. I started my tenure as chairman on January 1, and it couldn't have been a more exciting time and a more challenging time to become chairman. But I just want to welcome everyone here to the Mesa, and to get things kicked off, I just wanted to give a little bit of a sense of who is here, who are the ARM community. So you're going to be here attending the meeting for the next 2.5 days. We have over 500 C-suite member representatives at the meeting, over 250 CDMOs and CRO service providers who are kind of the infrastructure and the lifeblood of the ecosystem, more than 340 therapeutic developers who are working on the most exciting areas of science and some of the really significant transformational clinical benefits that these technologies are delivering to patients who are desperately in need of them. And we also, on the investor side, have over 60 investors. So those of you who are in the active fundraising mode, please use this opportunity to network as many of these investors. They're here to fund your innovation. One of the most important aspects of my role as chairman of the board of directors for ARM is to make sure that we continue to improve and grow the organization, and also that we have an excellent board that would steward the mission of ARM and the delivery of ARM's objectives. So just to give you a sense, every year, starting in June, we start the annual renewal process for representatives to be on the board of directors for ARM. The ARM board is comprised of 33 seats. It's overseen by the Governance and Operations Committee. And each annual nomination, starting in June, we solicit applications, and we also reaffirm that the current board members who are still within their term limit are willing to serve. The nominations for leadership are then reviewed by the Nomination and Advisory Committee. And what we look for are individuals with outstanding leadership skills, expertise in different areas of technology, geographic representation, and what we want is a diverse, strong board so that we have all of the representation for technologies, manufacturing, clinical development, regulatory, whatever expertise we view as being necessary to deliver on ARM's mission. The Nominations Advisory Committee reviewed 43 outstanding candidates for the board. And I have to tell you, the deliberations that the committee goes through are quite rigorous, challenging, and in an optimistic view, I feel like we can never make a bad decision. The quality of the applicants are outstanding. The board seats are for 1 year for both current board members and also for new members. There is a 5-year term limit for 5 consecutive years, and each board member serves starting on January 1 of 2026. So I'm very pleased to share with you the proposed additions to the 2026 ARM Board of Directors: Allison Barrett, Warner Biddle, Seth Ettenberg, Jason Foster, Linnell Hoke, Rachel McMinn, and Joanne Smith-Farrell. I just want to share with you, these 7 candidates are outstanding leaders, distinguished in their field, accomplished in all of their careers, and I think they're going to be great additions to the board. I'm really pleased and honored to be able to nominate them to the membership. And here's the complete slate for the 2026 ARM Board of Directors. I just wanted to give you a moment to take a look at those, and then we will proceed to a vote. So all ARM member representatives in the room are entitled to a vote. We will proceed to a vote by voice. So all those in favor of voting for the 2026 slate of Board of Directors, I would ask you now to shout out a big yes. Yes. A big yes? Yes. And any opposed? If you're opposed, please say no. Hearing no no's, the motion to approve the 2026 ARM Board of Slate of Directors is approved. And with that, I will proceed to turn this podium over to Tim. And thank you very much for being an OR member and for participating and attending the meeting. Pablo.
Great. Mr. Chairman, nice job. Great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Bob. Before I get started, let me, it's become sort of an annual rite of passage. I want to do a couple of housekeeping things. First, I want to thank, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for our amazing events team. So I want to thank Kelly McWhinney, J&C Curl, Brittany Miller, Jackie Williams, Laura Stringham, their fearless leader, Laura Stringham, for putting on a great show. I also want to thank our outgoing board members. We've got a great group of people that have given us many years of terrific service, and I want to thank them for helping build the community, thinking about the whole field, not just their individual organizations, and doing just a terrific job overall. And in addition to welcoming the new 7 board members that are coming in, as well as the returning board members. So please just join me. One more round of thanks. Great, so with that, welcome to Phoenix. Bob touched on it, like how much better, for those that were here last year, like how much better is the weather, right? Like it was oppressive, right, last time. I was talking to Matt Hewitt this morning over breakfast from Charles River, and he reminded me it hit, I think it was 115 at one point last year. And we didn't make a big deal about it. We kind of all endured the weather, but it was oppressive, right? So this is much better. We're super excited to be here. We're really excited to welcome everybody back to Phoenix and the iconic Arizona Biltmore. So I'm going to break my slides up essentially into 2 different buckets. The first is 2025 essentially in review, and the second is really around some sector highlights that I want to kind of tease out for people, okay? So first, I think it's important to just acknowledge the realities that we face as a field and not be kind of either too Pollyannish nor too sort of doom and gloom about what we've gone through as a field, right? And so I think it's good for sort of fair balance to talk straight about both the things that are going great, but also the inevitable headwinds that we face every year, right? And this year, we've certainly seen some headwinds, right? So look, the capital markets have, as everybody knows, have been a challenge for now we're going on 4 years, right? It's been a tough investor climate for all of biotechnology, and cell and gene therapy has not been immune to that. In fact, in some ways, it's been harder over the years. We've got some data to show things appear to be better, at least relatively speaking. But it's been a hard environment. We all know that, right? There have been some safety issues that have popped up, including some deaths that took place this year. And of course, every death is a serious tragedy, right? And a very, very difficult for the families, most importantly. But it's a challenge for the field and the companies that go through them and the academic centers that are leading the clinical trials or the commercial products. So that's a real headwind that we need to, I think it's important that we acknowledge, right? I think when you look at the totality of the evidence in a lot of these programs, right, these are usually the natural history is pretty tough. It tells a pretty tough tale of what the patient's life expectancy will look like, but a death is a death. It's a serious thing, right? And there's been turnover at the FDA, right? We know that was a challenge kind of early in, I think it was the first quarter, and then it continued a little bit in the second quarter of the year. It's a real thing, and that reads into people's questions, legitimate questions, I think, about how will the FDA be at execution, right? These are all fair questions that I think we need to be able to acknowledge, right? And again, there's other uncertainties out there, right? It's not just limited to those 3. We've seen kind of bigger national issues around tariffs, around drug pricing, MFN pricing. Those are still pulling through. We're not sure how those will all kind of play out in the final analysis yet, right? The government's in the middle of a shutdown that hopefully will resolve itself, but these are things, right? And so it's important to acknowledge them. They leave some uncertainty around the sector. Okay, but with that said, I've got 4 slides that I'm going to show you that I think are a good glimpse of what we've talked about for a few years, which is one of the missions of ARM is to try to focus on, can we help these healthcare systems modernize so that they are embracing these important, these powerful cell and gene therapies, right? So think of regulators and payers primarily. And I think there's four good examples of where we see progress in that area. The first is we've spent a lot of time in the first half of the year and through the summer working with the administration, right? To basically try to have them understand how highly aligned we think cell and gene therapies are with their Make America Healthy Again agenda, right? Which they're very focused on getting at the root causes of disease as opposed to managing chronic conditions. And we think that's, pretty highly aligned. So I was very pleased to be invited back in early March to a meeting with RFK Jr. That he pulled together on regenerative medicine. And in the meeting, he just said, he was pretty straight up, and he's like, look, there's some stuff we want to get done through executive action, like give us ideas on things we can just do. We don't have to go through Congress. We can just do it through the stroke of a pen. That will further the field of regenerative medicine. And so we did some follow-up meetings with his team later in March and in April, and ultimately we submitted 8 specific actions that we thought they could just pull the trigger on and really kind of get after. And I'll come back to that in a minute, but that so far has gone well. A lot of people know there was a big cell and gene therapy FDA roundtable that took place in early June. I was very pleased to be part of that event, as were a number of members of the ARM community. In July, we had 2 really important gatherings, one with Marty Makary and Vinay Prasad at the FDA. A very small group of us went in and met with them. And the following week, we had members of our board of directors that were in town for our congressional fly-in, and we met with Dr. Oz. And in both meetings, we were like, we want you to take away 2 things. One, we come as friendlies, right? We want to work with you guys. And 2, all we want to do is help you guys execute your big vision on cell and gene therapy. If you're able to execute your vision on what you want to get done, we think, thousands of lives will be improved or saved. And as I said to Marty Makary, I'm like, look, I learned a lesson years ago, and it does apply, in my view, to the FDA, which is vision without execution equals delusion, right? And otherwise, we're just thinking big stuff and nothing's getting done. And the FDA is about, you got to get stuff done. And I think in balance, they've gotten more done that's been positive than negative, certainly as it relates to our field. But that's something that's very top of mind for me, and I know the entire team at ARM. Like, execution is very important. So in that spirit, there's a couple of things that have gone, I think, particularly well this year. One is related to CMS, right? So CMMI, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, during the Biden administration, put out, a very interesting voluntary program that looks at sickle cell disease and could they pull together, CMS, central CMS, state Medicaid programs, and then Vertex and Bluebird, the 2 biotech companies that have the approved sickle cell therapies, to essentially negotiate, in a voluntary manner, outcomes-based arrangements that could hopefully enable more patients to have access to these important sickle cell medicines. And to date, there's been 33 states that have signed up for it, I believe, including California and New York, if I'm right. I think California and New York, so some of the big states as well as DC and Puerto Rico. We were concerned that the new Trump administration, when they came in, would shelve this effort, and we wanted to see, what could it actually produce? And so far, they have very warmly embraced it. It's still the early days, but we're hopeful if this goes well, there may be an opportunity to expand it, potentially on a voluntary basis into some other therapeutic areas. So it's an area to watch, but some early progress. Okay, busy slide, but important slide. So I mentioned that there were 8 specific areas that we floated to the HHS and FDA teams. And the first one on the menu was around CAR T access, right? So a lot of people don't know this, but as powerful as these CAR T therapies are, and they are incredibly powerful and revolutionary, some 80 to 85% of the people that are eligible to be on CAR T therapy ultimately do not receive therapy, right? Big number. So there's a lot that needs to be unpacked there. The challenge is there's a lot to unpack there. It's a very complex puzzle with a lot of pieces as to why that is. Some of it's patient behavior, some of it's what takes place with the provider, some of it's around reimbursement, a lot of complexities. But we worked with a group of some of the leading CAR T companies, put together a little working group, and we tried to unpack some of the areas that we thought maybe we could help remedy. And the one that bubbled up as perhaps the biggest piece of the puzzle was the original FDA labels that were put in place, right? So they put what at the time was perceived as very reasonable restrictions, because remember, if you roll back the clock, 2015, 2016 is when the data was being generated, 2017 is when the labels were put together, people were dying from cytokine release syndromes, right? People were dying from ICANS, right? A lot of serious adverse events. We talk about adverse events in gene therapy, serious adverse events and deaths in cell therapy. And so what the FDA did at the time, working with the companies, was they put some restrictions in place, right? So they wanted people to be within, for 4 weeks, they wanted people that have been dosed with cell therapy to be within 2 hours of a major treatment center in the event they had an adverse event. And they wanted for 8 weeks to ensure people were not driving an automobile, which at the time, you know, those might have been perfectly reasonable. But when you look back now, based on the real world data that we have and that the manufacturers have largely collected, it looks like the overwhelming majority of serious adverse events take place in what? The first 2 weeks, really the first week. So 8 weeks without driving a car is a pretty big burden on someone if they're in their 50s or 60s or 70s to not drive, right? And 4 weeks to be within 2 hours of a treatment facility if you're in more rural areas, it's a lot. So we had a lot of engagement with the FDA. A bunch of the companies were also pushing on this issue specifically related to their products. And in the end, they cut both of those restrictions back to 2 weeks, and they eliminated their REMS program. So when we met with Marty McCary, we were like, look, this is Exhibit A. When we talk about having a vision and then executing some specific stuff that we think will help unlock the cell and gene therapy field, this is a great example. So they were very pleased that we were pleased that it all went so well. Okay, hopping across the pond on some European engagement. There's been some great work done with the EMA, led by Monica Veldman and Paolo Morghese and our team at ARM, Mike Lemke, around thinking about working with them specifically on gene editing. A whole bunch of areas, but specifically on gene editing. And if you roll back the clock, I would say 12 months, probably. 18 months was probably when we first had a real discussion about it. We got some great feedback from our board, which was, hey, you guys have a really good, at ARM, a really good relationship with the FDA. EMA, not so hot, not so great. You know, is that something you guys could put, you know, a renewed focus on? So we took that to heart, and our big push was we invited Emer Cook, the head of the EMA, to our meeting in Rome. Back in April, she came, she gave a talk, did a fireside chat with me, and she spent a lot of time with our board of directors, right? And that really kind of kicked off, I'd say, you know, our next piece of our relationship. And really Monica, Paolo, Mike, and the team have done a great job of sort of furthering that with some very specific things. But most recently, just a few weeks ago, we co-hosted with the EMA and the CAT a workshop on gene editing that looked at, among other things, could we try to build a pathway to platform technologies for gene editing in Europe, which is very exciting. So there's a lot of follow-up work to be done. The team also has done a great job with the EU Health Commissioner, who is very focused on trying to drive greater patient access and strengthen EU's competitiveness. More work to be done there. And there's a new EU Biotech Act that we're excited about that's looking again at competitiveness and strengthening innovation in health. So more work to be done there, but we've organized a bunch of leaders to weigh in on a kind of a policy platform that we're very excited about. Okay, another busy slide. So, but turning from modernizing healthcare systems to thinking about the capital markets and how we can, you know, try to make a little bit of an improvement there. So I mentioned we got some very helpful feedback, excuse me, from our board of directors on the EMA. We all know the capital markets have been very tricky for the last few years. We got some similar feedback from people in our community, including some of our board members, around, look, is there anything ARM can do that could be constructive to help, in some way with what's going on with the capital markets. And I've frankly, candidly, kind of resisted this for a while. And I joked not that long ago in a forum that proof that even I have the capability to listen and change behavior. A bunch of board members were like, look, let's put together like a task and finish group and take a look at this thing, which we did. We put Robert Ang in charge of it, got a bunch of really good CEOs on it, and we really looked at like, are there some areas where we can think about like impact and feasibility? Can we make a real impact? Because we don't want to just do things that are activities, right? Just stuff that keeps us busy. Like, what could we really do? And we did bring in, some of you are familiar with a guy named, an executive in biotech named Tay Salamula. We brought Tay in as our first executive in residence to ARM. So he was essentially the commercial lead for Zolgensma for many years, very successful blockbuster product available in 50 markets around the world with a real track record. Tay's got a track record of getting things done in the commercial setting. So we folded him into the sort of the ARM family and went off after sort of this initiative, which we called our reasons to believe in cell and gene therapy. And we made a lot of progress. We kicked some stuff off at JP Morgan in our State of the Industry presentation that I give every year. And then by March, we started reaching out to the financial analyst community. And that, went, I would say, in our view, pretty well. And we started talking about, think about the commercial opportunities in cell and gene therapy. Don't just look at a few areas where there's challenges, but like think about some of the things that are going really well. Balancing out what the pipeline could look like. And I've got some slides in just a moment, but that work went pretty well. And then we eventually put all that together in one big PowerPoint presentation and rolled it out to our community back in July. And the feedback on that's been pretty good. If you haven't seen that deck, please get in touch with Stephen Majors, our head of investor relations and communications. He's been really spearheading all of this and has done a remarkable job on it, in my view. Another busy slide. I won't go through everything that's up here. These are like the different chapters of our Reason to Believe deck. But as I said, it's really worth giving it a quick review. A lot of data, a lot of good analytics, a lot of context. And part of it is there are things like deaths, right? But sometimes, and there have been some commercial struggles, like we talked about earlier. But context, I think, is super helpful. And some of you have heard me say this over the years. I do believe God created optimists to get us through the hard times, right? And there's been some hard times in cell and gene therapy. This deck is a resource that is neither Pollyannish nor is it doom and gloom. It's sort of a glass half full view of the field. And again, we've run it through analysts and investors and CEOs and taken a lot of feedback, gotten some great data points in there, I think, and made some changes to it. And we're going to update this periodically. And so I mentioned we got out kind of on the hustings and have been talking to a number of analysts. And I think we're up to something like, 17 or 18 different analysts that we've spoken with. And some have invited us to come and speak to their investors. And when they do that, they sometimes put out a helpful note that summarizes it. A lot of it, you can imagine, was around changes with the FDA in the spring. There was a lot of demand on like, what are we hearing? What are we seeing? How are things playing out across the sector? So far, so good. All right, cool slide, exciting slide. Yesterday, we had our first CEO and investor summit that we did right here. We called it day zero. So before we kicked off today's official events, right? We had 140 attendees, more than 40 investors and analysts, more than 40 biotech company people, mostly CEOs. It was great, well attended. And people told a bunch of war stories about like stuff that's going well as what are analysts seeing. We had a panel of analysts, some of the top analysts in the field, some great investors listed here, and then some of the leading companies also talked about some of their recent raises. So Trogenics, Ken McNamara from Trogenics, Scottish company, people may have seen today, they announced a $95 million raise for a gene therapy for glioblastoma. Super important area, right? Very cool. Actually, not on this slide. I don't know if Devin Smith's probably here somewhere, but the Arbor team announced a $115 million deal with the Chiesi group out of Italy, an upfront milestone to work on some rare kidney conditions. So Devin slipped that one past us, but we're going to catch him later and teach him a lesson. $150 million BD deal up front, which is great. Prime Medicine, Alan Ryan, $144 million raise, Splice, $135 million. So a lot of great news that was shared yesterday. And then switching gears completely, people may have seen, maybe some people have seen that we relaunched on Friday our website. We had a perfectly okay website, but it was organized like a plate of spaghetti through no one's fault. A few years ago, the team was like, let's fix it up. And I'm like, don't fix it, just blow it up. Don't fix it up, blow it up. So Adam Wolf on our team led a really great project that got a lot of our folks involved. When you get a chance, go to our new website. It's much better organized. I think it tells a much better story about the field and ARM and a bunch of other things that are important to us. So we're very pleased to have that one off the ground. And then you may have also noticed we kind of snuck in a little branding refresh and put some new colors in place. We got rid of, if people are really into autumn colors, I'm sorry, but we've sunset the orange and the purple. It had a great run, but it was time to retire those colors. We brought in some blues and even a little touch of pink here and there. And then lastly, given where the real estate market is in Washington, D.C., we kept hearing that the owners of our building were teetering on the brink of trouble as more and more people left, so we needed a new office space. So we found a great new home very close to Capitol Hill. The American College of Surgeons owns the building. It's their building. It's a nice building, not opulent, but very nice. It's a nonprofit type of building. So we're going to be moving by the end of the year. So a couple of just little housekeeping things related to ARM. Okay, sector highlights. Let's jump into a couple things related to that. So we've got, this year we're looking at, we know we've had 6 approvals between the US and Europe for cell and gene therapies. We've got 4 that are pending, so up to a possible 10 that might hit. That's lighter than last year. That happens. Some years you have stronger years, some years you have lighter years. But there's been a couple of speed bumps and a few programs have gotten pushed out to 2026. The good news there is it lines up 2026 to potentially have a pretty strong year, which is always good to see. But, progress continues to be made. And this is a good news slide. So this slide, we track a basket of 31 cell and gene therapy companies as sort of a little mini version of an index for us. We've been tracking it. We work with Precision AQ, an investor relations firm, Hannah Derishowitz and her team, and they've helped us with this. When we kicked off all this reasons to believe work, we brought in Hannah and her team from Precision to help us with this. And we started tracking, like, how are we doing with this basket of cell and gene therapy companies versus the XBI, right? And so if you look year to date, there's a lot of milestones that we flagged. The font is very small, but essentially it mirrors some of the volatility that we saw in the first half of the year, where you'd see the dark blue line is the cell and gene therapy basket, and we would kind of drop down when turnover happened at the FDA or other setbacks in the field, right? But when you look in toto, despite it not, we always talk about this is not a linear field, right? People that are in it know that for sure, right? What you've seen is a nice kind of recovery in sort of starting over the summer, where the field came back. And in fact, again, these are all temporary, right? But year to date, we're up over 26%. The XBI is up about 15%. So a nice little recovery and a very nice pop, by the way, since Unicure rolled out their very impressive data, right? So congratulations to Matt Capista and the team for what looks like it could be a very meaningful product in Huntington's disease, an area where we need progress for sure. So this is a good news slide, reasons to believe. All right, other good news stuff, right? So look, there's a lot of interest in cell and gene therapy and the future of what's driving our pipeline, right, for the next few years, right? A lot of progress in solid tumors. We saw our first approval for cell therapies in solid tumors last year, right? Today, there are 426 active trials in cell therapies. That's a lot of shoulder to the wheel working on solid tumors. And why is that important, right? 90% of the new adult cases of cancer are solid tumors. There is an enormous amount of need there. So it's a very exciting area for the field. There's been a lot of progress in the CAR T field. I was talking about the label update, which was really meaningful, but pushing into earlier lines of treatment is a really big deal. And then, I got a slide on this in a second, but autoimmune disorders, are really being addressed and looked at through cell therapies in a very meaningful way, something that's very exciting. And then on the in vivo, another area of real excitement, in vivo therapies, both CRISPR gene editing side of the house and also on the oncology side with CARs, right? A lot of progress being made there, a lot of excitement in the field. And then this is a slide that's familiar to some, but a ton of progress being made in prevalent diseases. So you look across, right, like wet AMD with 5.7 million people, Parkinson's disease, 10 million people, right? Multiple sclerosis, 1.5 million, type 1 diabetes, 3.8, right? Cardiac conditions, $3 million. And you see REGENXBIO, AbbVie, Blue Rock, Bayer, Bristol Myers Squibb, Kyverna, right? Vertex, Sana, Verve, Lilly, big and small companies all kind of lining up because they realize what this could be some very, very powerful breakthroughs for people that need real help with these big global conditions, big markets, right? And this slide's a little bit of an eye chart, but this just shows you there's 130 ongoing trials in autoimmune, right? With a lot of progress being made in phase 2 and phase 3. Tough areas to treat. Difficult breakthrough lupus, right? Scleroderma, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, right? A lot of tough disorders, some of which, of course, some patients are treated and manage their conditions pretty well for many years with these conditions, but they're managing them. They're not getting usually at the root causes of disease. And so there's I think a lot of optimism in the field, rightly, that, look, maybe we could kind of get at the underlying biology and fundamentally change the trajectory of some of these most difficult autoimmune disorders. And if you want to hear more about this, right, like come listen to Marcy McHugh for a powerful fireside chat. She'll talk about how she was the first multiple sclerosis patient to be treated in a CAR T therapy and how it transformed her life. This will be moderated by Kelly Kester from Cardinal Health, right? We've got, by the way, we've got a great lineup of patient groups, patient advocates speaking today, right? Tom Whitehead's going to speak. We've got Victoria Gray, Charlene Song-Rigby. We've got a whole raft of people coming to tell you about, you know, their experience, what they went through, or their hope for the field. So really looking forward to hearing a lot of these stories, but starting with Marcy. Okay, and then the other thing is the size of these markets, right? You add them all up and go back, you know, if you go back to 2018, right, they just had therapies approved for the first time, I think in 2017, right? So these were small, you know, early days on the revenue curve. Skip forward to 2024, right? What do you have? $8.4 billion in revenue. That's pretty good, right? You look at the Wall Street consensus data, not our data, not ARM's data. Look at the Wall Street analysts and where they net out for consensus data from year-end 2024 to year-end 2030, growing from 8.4 billion to over 54 billion, a greater than 36% compound annual growth rate. That's a pretty strong growth rate, right? And a lot of it's because they see these areas, companies see these really important areas of high unmet need and what cell and gene therapy could potentially do. Which is why so many of the large strategic pharmaceutical companies are investing very heavily in cell and gene therapy right now. So we pulled, if you look at the top 20 companies by market cap, 15 of them are investing very heavily in cell and gene therapy. We know their people. In many cases, they're on our board or they're on our advisory committees or they're very active with us, right? In fact, I was looking at this just the other day. It dawned on me on the flight out. I'm like, okay, so of the top 7 companies by market cap, all of them are in cell and gene therapy, right? So this is an important slide to remember. The investment is going up, not down. They see a lot of the potential in this field, which is important. And by the way, I think it was the Trogenics deal also had Eli Lilly as an investor for their glioblastoma raise, the $95 million raise that Ken pulled together. And then lots of other positive raises, right? These are some of the biggest ones that we could see, right? Beam at $500 million, Unicure, I mentioned earlier with the Huntington's disease news just days ago, right? $345 million, Solid and Taysha, $200 million raises, big raises, right? And we'll go through all of them. Creatune, Etsena, right? All big raises, and then we saw some M&A. AbbVie plunked down $2.1 billion to buy Capstan, right? The largest acquisition since 2020 in the field. Lilly obviously picked up Verve for their cardiac gene editing work, $1 billion up front, and then AstraZeneca, right? So lots of investment in the field, and that's not alone. You've got Prime, I mentioned, did the $144 million public offering, and then a whole number of private placements that are very, very impressive and important for the field. So good progress. So if you want to hear more about our reasons to believe, if you want a glass half empty view, you've come to the right place, Meeting on the Mesa, right? We've got a whole bunch of sessions that are lined up for this. So please make note of a few of these and try to catch as many of them as you can. I think they'll be both informative and, I would argue, inspiring. All right. With that, I've said enough. I will leave you. So thank you very much.